Hi team. My first car cost £5,000, but by the time I'd learnt all my lessons, I'd probably spent about £50,000 and the real cost of owning a car. So in this video, I'm going to show you why the repayments mean nothing, and as an accountant, how you need to calculate the true cost of a car, and what I'd wish I'd known 20 years ago. So I'm going to give you a bit of a history of my car purchases, and like most people, my car history is a financial timeline. I'm going to show you exactly what I bought and when and why and what this meant. So showing my age a bit here, but I bought my first car with some help with my family, my mum and dad. Bought my sister and I a Fiesta, great car. And then I was very fortunate enough that my granddad gave me some inheritance, and for my 21st birthday, I thought it was a great idea to buy a car, a nearly new car, a Peugeot 206. Trying to be sensible enough with a 1 litre engine to keep the running costs down, but yeah, bittersweet. My 21st birthday it was broken into, so it wasn't a car that really sort of lasted very long in terms of keeping me happy, and it was also the slowest car in the world. So yeah, not the best investment. I then moved on, and I was, after university, I went and worked on a graduate scheme, and I went through my accountancy qualifications and worked really hard on that. And I've always been a bit of a petrol head, and I've loved cars. And I test drove loads of hot hatches and sports cars and stuff like that. And I saved up maybe 2/3 of the cost, and I bought myself a Mini Cooper S, basically nearly new, part lease. Lovely car, really enjoyed it. But yeah, maybe not the best choice in the world. But anyway, I moved into London, and like most people, you stop really using your car so much. I also wanted to buy an engagement ring for my wife. I had been saving up, but I wanted a really nice one, so I thought I'd release some money from that, some of the equity. And we were able to get a Golf diesel off a friend at a really good rate. And so we swapped and got that car. Now, we held that car for the best part of 11 years. Started to understand about financial decisions and, understanding money. There was just no need to spend any more. So this is when I really started to appreciate the cost of ownership of a car, making financial decisions and wise financial decisions on car ownership. Now, fast forward to 2023, and we still own this car. Now, the only reason we changed was because in London, they have something called the ULEZ, which is the London Low Emission Zone. And effectively, because our car was so old, it was £12.50 per day, or whenever you turn the engine on, and moved it anywhere. So we were using the car now to drop kids everywhere. My wife was using it a bit for work. So maybe 6 days a week, 5 days a week, we were using this car, costing £60, £75 a week to 140, maybe £300 a month, for the privilege of using the car. Now, it was completely nonsensical. We still needed a car, but we needed to change. So blessed to have a car allowance at work, and as part of my job. And so at the time, it just made financial sense to go onto the car scheme and get an EV. We'll talk about the numbers later, but essentially it was far cheaper to have a brand new Tesla than it was to have a 15-year-old diesel Golf. That is crazy. So we had that for a year, changed jobs, and then we did something similar, and got another one on a different scheme, but essentially the same principle, slightly more practical car for our family. But yeah, that is my car history. Now, I'm going to very quickly just run through the cost of ownership just to show you what it cost me over the life of those cars. Now, obviously the Fiesta was quite cheap to run, obviously ignoring inflation here, but approximate costs around £1,500 a year. The 206 was a bit more because it was a newer car, so I was paying for depreciation. Moving on to the Mini, obviously it's a massive jump up here, to about £3,500 a year. And then we had the Golf. Obviously, we got it on a really good deal. Nothing went wrong with it. We kept it for 11 years. And so the running costs were about £1,500 a year, even in London, including parking. It was, a no-brainer to have that as a convenience. And it was going to jump up to about £4,500 just to have that car if we kept it with the low emission zone. So it made no sense. Now that I've put the cost in for roughly what it costs us for the Teslas as part of a company scheme, it's about £3,500 a year. The maths might not seem right, but when you talk about it and why it's so much cheaper, and actually if you're fortunate enough to be on a company car scheme, why these might be a viable option compared to a private lease, because it makes sense from a tax perspective. So anyway, I want to talk about what the true cost of ownership is. Now, there's no one size fits all, and how much people spend on a car, or why they spend money on a car. Everyone buys cars for different reasons, emotional, etc. But they are one of the biggest wealth drainers, one of the top three expenses anyone spends, and quite often transport is unavoidable. But people think of cars as an asset. It's actually really a liability because it costs you money. It depreciates quicker than you think. It continuously drains money, has things like repairs and stuff that you've got to keep on top of. And yeah, you're locked in for 3 to 6 years, which is a big commitment, and life circumstances change. So I think we've got to think about forgetting that monthly payment, and actually think about the true cost or the total cost of ownership of a car, which is often twice as much as you think it is. You've got to include all the different elements of that. Now, very high level numbers, just as an example, I've included here. A car of 30,000 that depreciates by 15, £15,000 of depreciation, keep it really simple. Fuel might be £2,000 a year, insurance £1,000 a year, servicing, might be £400-500 a year, and then taxes a few £100 a year. So it's going to cost you tens and tens of thousands of pounds to have a car over a period of years, which is far more than people think. Now, there are two key rules to apply, or at least commonly common rules to apply when owning a car. Now, the first one is people advise to use a percentage of your gross salary. I'm a bit skeptical of this because typically it's around 25 to 35% of a gross salary. So if we think about this, £50,000 salary, 12,500 to £17,500 per annum. But generalising, most people don't know what they spend, they don't understand their financial commitments or their spending habits. So we don't know if it's really actually going to be viable for most people and if this actually works. But secondly, this rule can't apply to everyone. If you're earning 100 grand, you're possibly not going to be spending 25 to 35,000 pounds a year on a car. Now, if you are, maybe that's your thing, but it is an awful lot of money. And quite likely, if you're earning that kind of money, you might live near a city, particularly in a part of the country that is, high housing costs. So, your money might be going elsewhere. But you've also got headroom at that kind of salary to invest and think about other things. So, you might not want to be spending this amount of money on a car. Now, I think the better rule of thumb here is, rather than thinking about as a percentage of your gross salary, is to think about looking at all of your fixed costs. So your housing, and this could be rent, mortgage, anything related to your housing, such as council tax or any bills, your car costs, and any debt. So anything that's fixed, fixed costs. And really, this shouldn't be more than 60%. And if it is, really, your car's too expensive. So that's a much better rule of doing it. Now, if you know this and you understand this, when you go and buy a car, you go to a dealer, you're armed with information to, possibly take the emotion away from buying something and get carried away, and you know what you can actually genuinely afford. And I appreciate that people really enjoy cars. Some people, it's their passion. Some people spend a lot of time in their cars. But, the rules of affordability still apply. You shouldn't really be or advised to spend more than 35% of your salary on a car. And maybe you can if you've looked at all of your expenses and you are sort of reducing other things and offsetting it elsewhere. But really, you need to keep these costs down. Second rule is around the 20-40-10 principle. Now, this is a commonly used rule. I'm very skeptical of this, and I'll explain why. So the key theory here is you put 20% down. It's for 4 years or less on a loan, and it should be 10% of your monthly income for the repayments. Now, this should include everything: your loans, insurance, maintenance, etc. So if you earn £4,000 a month, your total monthly spend should be less than £400. So we can look at the first scenario. Now, if you take a car that's £35,000 with no deposit, 8% APR, 5 years, and we'll just apply the formulas for this. I've just included them to make it easier to explain, but also for your reference if you ever want to try and calculate it yourself. The repayments here are £710 a month. You're paying £42,600 over the life of the 5 years, and you're paying £7,600 in interest. Now, this is to buy the car outright effectively over that term. Now, if we look at the second scenario, which is in line with the actual rule, it's 35,000, 20% deposit now, 8% APR, 5 years over the 48 months, so the 4-year term. Same formula, but this time it's £683 a month at 32,784 over the total 4 years. Interest of 4,784 this time. So we're saving £2,800 interest. But how many people have 10% of their salary that's £600-700? So in these examples, with a car that is only £35,000, which is a medium-sized car with a 20% deposit, are people who actually can afford this? And this is the reason why people end up spending 20 or 30% of their salary, or they go for other options like PCP, where you're just paying for the interest and depreciation, and it brings the repayments down, but you're in that constant cycle of changing cars, and you're never owning that car. But we'll talk about that in the second video. Now, I've included a kind of a generalized graph of different cars and their ownership costs. So I've got the car we've got today, which is what it's going to cost us for the 3 years we've got it on. We've got a £35,000 car, a £50,000 car, and a second-hand car that's around £12,500. And as you can see, the ownership costs of a private car on different methods, different schemes, it's going to be multiples of the car scheme we've got. And interestingly, the second-hand car that's £12,500 would cost us in a private lease or scheme would cost about the same as having our Tesla, which is crazy, and that's why we've gone and done it. So the next option is buying a car outright. This removes all the interest and requires more upfront cash. There's a lost opportunity, any kind of investments you might make from that. But to some degree, the opportunity cost, let's call it, applies to all types of purchasing. If you're putting deposits down or monthly payments, you're forgoing the opportunity to invest in anything. It's just much easier to explain when you're kind of going an all or nothing, do something, do nothing kind of scenario, where you could invest the money, £35,000 today, or spend that on a car. Now, the truth is, you don't need to spend lots of money on a car. We sold our Golf for only a few £1,000s. It was working perfectly fine. So, less than £5,000 probably can get you a good car to get you from A to B. But if you're using it as a commuting car, maybe it's a family car, you might be wanting to spend, £10,000-15,000 on a second-hand car. But there's no reason why you might need to be getting a new car each time. And actually, this will save you hundreds and hundreds of pounds every single month, tens of thousands of pounds over the course of the 3 to 5 years. And that money could be spent on so many more things, repayment of debt, building up a house deposit, going on holidays, so many things, right? Or even just saving and putting it delayed gratification to get a better car and save up for a car and then own it and hold it. The options are endless, but essentially it's so much better to do that if you can. So for me, we've gone for the electric car on the company car scheme. The numbers make sense. You take a company car allowance, and by the time you've paid tax and NI, you're left with around 58% or less, depending on what tax band you are of that, if you're taking it as cash. So actually, what could be a reasonable monthly allowance might be less than £300 a month net of tax. You might be paying around £25 to £35 of benefit in kind at the moment on 2-3% if it's an electric car. So all in, you're probably spending £300-ish, or foregoing £300 of income to exchange it for a car. And for that, you're not only getting a new car, but you're getting a car with insurance, tax, MOT, warranties, literally everything's included in a company car generally. So you're completely de-risking, and you can give the car back. So it's a brilliant incentive if you're eligible for it. But sometimes the best option is to do nothing, to have no car. So if your circumstances are that you live in a city, potentially like live in London like I do, and you weren't commuting, then having no car is completely viable. Now, the amount of money you could be saving every month, the hundreds of pounds, the tens of thousands of pounds over the 3, 5 years, that is a big opportunity if you can. But cars are emotional. I love cars, or I have done in the past. I think more now with my head than my heart. I love the smell, I love the engine sounds. They are an emotional thing, going in and choosing your car and the driving experience of it. True financial freedom doesn't come from the car. It's when you disconnect your identity from that consumption and you have that all that money spare to invest and save and pay down and do other things that are meaningful in life. If you want to build any form of wealth, you want to reduce your debt, you want to save for a house. Millionaires rarely buy new cars. They buy second-hand cars or cars on a deal. They buy and hold. They buy for value. They buy for reliability, and they keep and hold them. Now, as a petrolhead or as a younger petrolhead, I used to love cars. I used to love engines, but the accountant in me has realised that this just doesn't align with my life's priorities right now. And actually, I'm a massive EV convert, at least for our primary car. And yeah, so that's why I've chosen to do it. You need to work out the true cost of ownership and your affordability. Now, try to remember that a car is not a status symbol, they're just a moving liability. If this helped you rethink the cost of a car, please share it, like and subscribe. And watch next week. We're going to be looking at the difference between leasing and buying, and salary sacrificing, and the different costs in the UK today.